Well, joining us now from Washington is Ghaith Al-Omari, a former Palestinian negotiator and now a senior fellow at the Washington Institute for Near East Policy. But first, let's go to Jerusalem and speak with Michael Dickson. He's the executive director of the Israel advocacy group Stand With Us. And Michael, there has been those that advocated this move did say that along with the justice of the cause as they saw it, it would help the peace process, in a sense, taking Jerusalem off the table. Could you explain that position, which clearly we didn't see peace today break out anywhere in Israel?
Well, peace takes time, and it's a pleasure to be with you, first of all, on this historic day from here in Jerusalem. I was at the embassy opening today, and it was a really moving occasion, and it fills me with hope. Hope for the future and hope for peace, because, as you said, it does take the issue of Jerusalem off the table. That issue should be off the table. Jerusalem has always been Israel's capital, and it is the capital of the Jewish people, obviously, since King David for 3,000 years. So this recognition of reality by the U.S. administration now takes this issue off the table and allows us to concentrate on real issues and building peace. And I was amazed that the Palestinians haven't taken this opportunity to jump forward with negotiations. Let's move forward after this amazing historic event.
Michael, but at the same time you say Jerusalem off the table, you're right. We have heard that from President Trump and from others in his administration, but we've also heard them say about as many times that the final status of Jerusalem, the final borders, must be decided in the future.
Well, what we saw from the U.S. administration, and even today in President Trump's announcement at the embassy opening, was that the Americans have very much left the door open to the Palestinians to negotiate peace with Israel, despite this recognition of the U.S. embassy. This should not be a bone of contention for anybody. It's been U.S. policy, it's bipartisan U.S. law since 1995, and Israel is most obviously the capital of Jerusalem is most obviously the capital of Israel. But as we've seen, unfortunately, rather than rush to peace, some Palestinians have rushed to violence, led, of course, by Hamas today. If I were the Palestinian Authority, I would use this opportunity to reach for the peace negotiation table.
Ghaith, what's your take on that?
I am sorry, I was unable to hear the answer of the other guests.
So let me give you the brief, essentially, that taking Jerusalem off the table, so to speak, or at least moving the embassy there, declaring Jerusalem as Israel's capital, what we have seen today is actually a way forward for peace that the Palestinian Authority should maybe capitalize on.
It's very hard for me to understand this logic, to be honest. At the end of the day, Jerusalem will have to be decided by negotiations. There will be no peace without an Israeli capital in Jerusalem and the Palestinian capital in Jerusalem. To prejudge that and to remove the claim of one of the two sides from Jerusalem will not serve the cause of peace. By the way, what is interesting is that the president himself, in the December 6th speech, was very clear about this issue, the issue that the final borders of Jerusalem will have to be agreed by negotiations. So Jerusalem will have to be negotiated. No one party can take it off the table and assume that we're going to reach peace.
And Michael, going forward, there are those who say that this doesn't really, in effect, change anything, that the symbolic significance of this really doesn't actually change anything on the ground. How do you respond to that?
Oh, I think it changes everything. This week you'll see 2 more countries move their embassy to Jerusalem, and you're going to see further countries move forward as momentum builds. And that's as it should be. It is right and proper that countries of the world understand that where Israel has its parliament, where Israel has its prime ministers and presidents' offices, where Israel operates its business of government, Jerusalem is its capital, and of course its embassies should be there. I think you're going to see more momentum. I think you're going to see more excitement building towards embracing Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, and that's certainly something we're already beginning to see.
Do you think that the Israeli government might use this moment to actually try to move towards a peace process, use maybe the advantage of having a White House that seems to be in line with its policies?
Well, at the embassy opening today, I was struck by how many of the speeches mentioned the word peace. Songs of peace were sung at this opening of the American embassy in Jerusalem. So no one can fault the Americans and no one can fault the Israelis for wanting peace and trying to work towards peace. It's in our grasp. Unfortunately, as we've seen most recently with a speech by President Abbas where he engaged in Holocaust denial, they're very far from peace. Palestinian leaders are educating the next generation to hate rather than to embrace peace. That That's what needs to change, and the funding for that hate education also needs to stop.
All right, a highly controversial speech that Mahmoud Abbas came out and apologized for a couple of weeks ago. Michael Dickson in Jerusalem. In Washington, Ghaith Al-Omari, a former Palestinian negotiator, now a senior fellow at the Washington Institute for Near East Policy. Ghaith, I want to zoom in for a moment on the Palestinian leadership. You have what is described as a very weak President Mahmoud Abbas, a split with Hamas, a decision to cut off ties with the White House. If you were advising the Palestinian Authority today, what might you tell them how to take a way forward?
I would argue two things. First of all, I think it is key for the Palestinian Authority to start giving some support to Gaza in terms of dealing with the deep humanitarian situation or crisis that we have there. Today, things in Gaza are unlivable. Partly this is due to the closure that Israel has imposed, partly it's due to the Egyptian action, but partly because it's due to the fact that the Palestinian leadership, President Abbas, has been unwilling to pay salaries to civil servants in Gaza, pay for electricity, fuel, etc. So they should deal with this. They should resume payment to Gaza, because at the end of the day, these are Palestinian people, and the humanitarian situation worsening is in no one's interest. When it comes to diplomacy, at the end of the day, I understand the frustration with the decision to move the embassy. I'm not a big fan, but at the end of the day, if we are going to have progress in diplomacy or even on improving things on the ground, the U.S. is indispensable. The Palestinian leadership needs to find a way to climb down from that tree and to re-engage with the U.S., making its position clear. In this sense, they should follow suit with almost every other Arab country. Jordan, Egypt, both countries are unhappy with the Jerusalem decision, but they understand that moving forward requires engagement with the U.S.
Ghaith, in a new reality where you have over 50 Palestinians killed today, no condemnation from the U.S. administration or even criticism that we saw in the past, even an EU statement that's weaker than past, aren't actions such as that at the Gaza border today self-defeating for the Palestinians?
But they are self-defeating, and there is no doubt that the way that Hamas has used some of this is cynical and unacceptable. On the other hand, many individuals, many of the demonstrators who are out there are not people who are thinking of the policy implication of their action. These are people who are angry, who feel hopelessness, who feel helplessness, who feel that their aspirations have been crushed, and therefore it's an expression of anger. I think we have a very volatile public mood. We need wise leadership to try to de-escalate it. Unfortunately, this is not going to be the Hamas leadership. Unfortunately, Abbas right now is not acting that way, nor are the Israelis acting in a positive way. I think this is time for the international community, the neighbors, to push all sides to de-escalate and to move away from this dynamic that is in no one's interest.